And maybe any questions?
Questions, yeah.
Can I ask too?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to ask the chair.
How extensive is LiDAR in Nova Scotia?
How extensive is it, or was it for the, or does it exist? Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I know some areas are quite well covered, like most of the Bay of Fundy is covered. Certain other areas we have good information through the RAC and ACAS project. The 6 communities that are part of that project in Nova Scotia have relatively good coverage now. What still remains is that in some areas it's at a different level or quality or different type of LiDAR was flown, and the ability to access that is not equal. So some of it's in private hands or within academia or within certain departments, and it's getting access to that.
And my second question, just based on
I'll just mention that COGS is looking at producing a LiDAR data center, putting together, like one-stop shopping for LiDAR in Atlantic Canada, and all the different surveys that have been done, and that's something that we're talking with people at COGS about, which from my perspective we've been pushing them to, a significant amount of this should be freely accessible, right? But that is as much as possible. But anyway, that's something that's sort of being considered right now.
Andy, what's COGS?
Oh, I'm sorry, Center for Geographic Sciences. They're part of the Nova Scotia Community College. So they've got what's the Atlantic Regional Geospatial Research. They are. Yeah, at COGS has been a key player in a lot of the LiDAR surveys in Atlantic.
And my second question, based on your consultation, are more people saying we have to adapt to what's coming, or are more people saying, and I say this because I want to see the North Shore PEI tomorrow evening, but are more people saying we have to protect and preserve? Do they realize that they may have to have more coastal planning, that they may have to say you can't put that boardwalk there, that beach access there, that wharf there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and that, in my experience, that's changed a lot over the past, I'd say, 5 years. When we first went out, we're talking to people early in municipalities about this early on. We got a lot of kickback, but now I think people are seeing this as this is life now. So I think there is a much more awareness and acceptance of planning, mitigation. But there is the issue of adaptation. When people have property and that's all they have, or there's infrastructure, there is that hard question of, okay, well, do we need to protect this, or do we need to adapt and move, or so? But I think people are come around a bit more on that.
If you look at the situation in Europe, I mean, they've spent billions and billions of euros on hard. I mean, I don't think our economy could afford to do what they've done out there. But anyway, other questions?
I'm curious about what kind of model are you using for the sea level rise and everything you relate to climate change. Is it done internally, or is you working with some people, research?
Yeah, I don't know the details of that specifically in terms of the type of LiDAR modeling or digital elevation modeling. Yeah, I don't know the details in terms of what specific type. I know that there is work that's been ongoing for the past couple of years. We have a LiDAR working group through Geonova that's working to develop sort of common standard or approach as the province gets involved with any kind of LiDAR mapping that we would use, make sure that it's standardized and that it can be applied to different user needs.
But Carl, I think your question though was about the sea level rise model, isn't it?
Sea level, storm source, everything related to climate change.
I mean, the Natural Resources Canada, Don Forbes and others have been working on the whole business of okay, what's the likely level that we're going to be looking at?
Yeah.
Right. So there's that part of it. Storm surge stuff has been a lot of work at Dalhousie done in models for. I think the storm surge warnings that you get from the weather office now are based upon work that had originally happened at Dalhousie University of looking at modeling.
Yeah, I'm not aware of the technical side.
Linking low pressure areas to storm surge things. And maybe it's Keith Thompson, I think, or somebody at Dow that did a lot of that work. Jennifer.
Is there any talk about actually advancing it beyond just the sea level rise and the storm surge component of the coast? Generally with storms comes a lot of rain, and sometimes in the winter, you know, a lot of freezing, and so that whole effect of runoff from watersheds,
Right.
and, you know, potential, you know, not being able to, the water not being able to percolate due to, you know, the frozen nature of the soil. I'm sort of thinking about the rotary. The bad winter storm came up and the ground had been frozen, then there was a big thaw, then there was a huge rain, and the Halifax Rotary was underwater because there was also a bit of a storm surge. So certainly sea level rise and storm surge are one component, but in a really bad storm, there are a couple of other elements as well.
Yeah, that's true. Again, I'm not so familiar with the technical side of things, so perhaps, but I don't know. But again, I would sort of bring it back to, and maybe not for this case exactly, but I think what we'll have to do is, we don't have all the resources in the world, and we'll have all the time either, and it's going to be about focusing on, well, what are the key things, the information that we need to know to make the best decisions. And in that case, that might be, in a certain community, that might be their history of that in terms of freshet or flooding, but I think we have to prioritize and say, okay, well, what's the most important information we need?
And actually at the LIDAR workshop at BIO a week or so ago, Wilf Perry from BIO was talking about wave runup too, so if you have to add
Oh yeah, well that's,
wave
I kind of
runup
assumed
on
that
top of
was a part
storm
of it.
surge,
Yeah.
on top of sea
Yeah.
level rise, so
Usually it's cumulative.
It's
When,
yeah.
when bad things happen, they happen all together.
Paul?
On a less technical note, Justin, you didn't define coast.
Yeah.
Is that a question you anticipate?
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, we did address it in our State of the Coast report, in the sense that when we say coastal development standards, yes, we're going to have to define what we mean by standards and in what area of the coast and how they apply. But in terms of defining the coast, I think if you get too hung up on defining, it's 1 kilometer back or it's to the nearest road, it really depends on the issues you're looking at. So if you're looking at water quality, well, in that case, the coast might include the entire watershed. But if you're looking at public access to the coast, then you really are talking about a pretty finite area along the coast. So no, I'm not too hung up on defining the coast.
Okay.
Most jurisdictions define it when regulations or law gets put into place. And so if we ever get down to that level, then yeah, we need to define an area that we refer to.
So I guess I have a question, you just mentioned that, I mean, what is this, do you see significant changes in the regulatory environment within the province, or are you going to be using softer techniques to try to do this?
Well, I think it's open. What I think we need to figure out first is when we say we want to establish coastal development standards, well, what is it that we're trying to achieve? So if it's protect people and property, or if it's ecosystem services that we want to protect, looking at, well, what's the key thing that we need to protect, and then looking, well, what's the best tool for that? If it's a hard law or it's regulatory, it's a bylaw, that's one thing. If it's guidelines, that's another thing. But I don't foresee, like, we're not going to be coming out with a full new act that completely changes the governance structure for coastal management in Nova Scotia. That right now, that's not where we perceive this going.
Other questions for Justin?
Are the link with the municipalities, are they good? Because are they waiting for the strategies to come out and change a bit the way they are doing things, or
That's a great question. Glad you asked that. Because I think I don't want to generalize too much because there's always differences among individual municipalities. But in a general sense, municipalities are very on board with where we're going here, and they've really identified the need for provincial leadership in information and capacity building to do a better job about where we develop along the coast. And so again, that's something that's changed, I think, quite significantly in the last 5 years or so, where I think initially when you start talking about, when you say coastal development standards, people immediately imagine a line on the coast and people's rights to use their land severely restricted. But when you start talking about what you mean by that in terms of it's about protecting people and property, it's about making sure that We're protecting the aspects of the coast that we actually want to maintain for future generations. It's a different kind of conversation, and municipalities are already, some municipalities are already gone ahead and done it, like HRM, Region Queen, and so it's about bringing those same tools and approaches to other areas as well.